The governor's race in Alabama is heating up, and AI data centers are becoming a defining issue in the race between Democratic former Senator Doug Jones and Republican Senator and staunch Trump ally Tommy Tuberville. The group Alabama Leadership Fund released a new campaign ad targeting Tuberville on his goal of expanding data centers in the state.
Congress is considering pausing massive AI data centers until federal safeguards are in place. But Senator Tommy Tuberville calls our concerns
bullcrap.
What about my electric bill?
What about the water?
The impact on our hunters and farmland. Tuberville says these concerns are
bullcrap. Never listen to all this nonsense they see on social media that's coming from China.
Senator, no one in Alabama listens to China, and our concerns are not bullcrap.
Joining us now is the Democratic nominee for Alabama governor, former Senator Doug Jones. So, Senator Jones, thanks for being with us now. And I just wanted to ask you to talk a bit about the issue of data centers in Alabama and what you're hearing from voters across the state. Because in some rural areas, these could provide jobs and it could generate some economic growth. Are they being welcomed at all, or is it negative feedback?
No, it's all negative feedback. Thanks for having me this morning, but I have not heard any positive feedback about the construction of data centers at this point, because the jobs are temporary. It is going to be good construction jobs, good union jobs. There's no doubt about that. There is likely to be some economic benefit, but nobody really knows. No one's actually telling folks. The biggest issue with the data center constructions right now is these things are massive, and there is a huge concern about how much power they will use, whether it's going to cause power rates to go up, the water usage, the noise, and just the overall quality of life when you have something 8 times the size of a Walmart supercenter going up in a town in a rural area of Alabama, or anywhere in Alabama for that matter. That really changes the whole complexion of the community. And the biggest problem that we've seen is most of this is being done behind closed doors. The communities are not being engaged until after the fact. And that's a real issue in Alabama, and I think across the country, when communities don't feel like they have a say-so in anything and they're being just told, and that things like this are just being crammed down their throat, they have a real problem with that. And I think you're seeing that across political lines, across racial lines, across economic lines, all the way up and down Alabama. We're hearing it big time.
Yeah, data centers is one of those issues that everyone can find something to hate on both sides of the aisle, and also age groups and races, like you said. I want to play some sound from President Trump talking about data centers, because, of course, Republicans are struggling with this message because of his message. Let's listen to that.
Right.
You have communities that really want the data centers. And frankly, those are the smart communities. And the ones that don't want it, you know, the happiest people in the world are foreign countries, number one, and number two, other communities within our country, because they're begging for them. You have to convince your community how great these things. You can't fight it. You have to go with it.
There's a campaign against, data centers. Mm-hmm. But data centers, if you look at the stats, everything's good around them. I saw Texas the other day sort of is against data centers. I think it's a mistake. If I were a governor, I would want data centers so badly. I'll cut taxes. I mean, taxes are going to go way down because this is a tremendous source of income.
Not exactly sure what that has to do with taxes, but I digress. One of the things that I am thinking about, there was like 20 reporters that could actually see President Trump get sworn in last January. And sitting in front of some members of his cabinet were the tech bros. And those are the folks who are kind of leading this effort. And the man who just spoke, the way he spoke, the reason that he feels so out of touch to people who are probably watching right now is because he's speaking the language of the tech bros, the people that he spends so much time with, the people that are spending a lot of money and giving it to him and talking to his staff a lot of the times. And I'm curious how you think the Republican Party, Tommy Tuberville, in your state, will struggle with this message and what voters may punish them for because they have to listen to Donald Trump talk about it, his buddies' data centers.
Well, look, Tommy Tuberville, I think, is just parroting everything that Donald Trump says. He is embracing everything that he said. Everything you just played, Eugene, everything you just played, Tommy Tuberville will repeat on if he ever gets out on the stump. He really doesn't do that in Alabama. He just talks to friendly audiences. But he will repeat the same lies, the same misrepresentation. He just parrots that. Money, money, money. It's a gold mine. Well, people don't trust. When an Alabama politician says that something's a gold mine, people are asking themselves, well, who's getting the gold? Who's getting the shaft? And that is a history here, but that's especially true when you hear it coming out of the mouth of Donald Trump or Tommy Tuberville, because it is, as Brian Poindexter said, it's all transactional then. It's all about money. Somebody is going to make some money. This is neither Donald Trump or Tommy Tuberville are listening to the communities. They're not talking to people out there and listening to their concerns. Tuberville says the concerns are bullcrap. His words, not mine, his words. And that's just not, people do not appreciate that. They do not want to have a politician that is supposed to be the leader in Alabama telling them their concerns are bullcrap and they're listening to China. I think they're completely out of touch on this issue, and they are only following the money. It is pure money, money, money for them, and you have to see who they've invested in, who is giving to their campaigns, and I think that says it all.
Senator, I'm hearing the reasons that you're laying out for the opposition here, but I'm wondering if there is any room for nuance or for an opportunity for Democrats to not just say, no, let's flat out oppose these, but yes, we can do these data centers according to these sorts of specifications, and why Democrats haven't recognized that they have the power to not just stop these, but make them better and use them, harness them in a more positive direction, such as addressing the climate crisis, using grid investment to force a transition to clean energy. Is that part of the conversation for you or for Democrats at all?
Absolutely. I don't think any Democrat is, with very, very few exceptions, are saying that we're totally opposed to data centers, that we're totally opposed to AI. No one is opposed to technology and progress. The problem is that when you start running down this road and you can't run back. And all I'm saying, for instance, is let's put a pause on this. Let's put a one-year moratorium to get the guardrails in place to, one, protect the communities, and number two, make sure they're involved and they're engaged. There are any number of communities, I think, in Alabama and across this country that if they have all the information and they know that they've got the protections in place that can be enforced once these things start going up, they would probably welcome these. There will be some economic advantage to that. Right now, those guardrails are not in place. No one is saying absolutely no data centers, period, end of discussion. They're saying, hold on a minute. We're way ahead of this game right now, and we can take a pause to put the appropriate guardrails in place to protect the quality of life in all of these areas. That's what I'm saying, and I think that's what most Democrats around the country are saying. We want to protect our communities, not stop progress.
Let's say that pledge is in place to protect the community. It's obviously a generous assumption, but what else would you require before then giving a yes to start building more of these?
Well, first of all, I think you've got to put some transparency in place. We want to know who the hell's building these things. Right now, you have this hodgepodge of shell corporations, and nobody knows who is actually coming in and building. No one knows what role our power company, for instance, is playing. That's a really hot topic down here right now. How much money are they going to make? How is the power going to be generated? Will the power be passed on to the consumers? Water quality is a big issue. You can put those safeguards in place, but you also need the community's ability to enforce those down the road should they not live up to their expectations. And stronger ethics laws to make sure that none of these elected officials are profiting from what they're doing, I think is absolutely necessary.
Former Senator Doug Jones with some nuance this morning. Thank you so much for coming to the weekend.
Thank you.